and now we invite His Excellency David L. Cohen, Ambassador of the United States to Canada, to give some remarks.
So thanks, John, and good morning to everyone, and welcome. It's truly an honor to join you at this Rebuild Ukraine conference alongside these great speakers, and especially my friend, Ambassador Kovalev, who I am honored to serve with in Ottawa and who has truly become the face of Ukraine in Canada. Let me start with a fundamental statement of purpose on behalf of the United States of America. The United States is fully committed to supporting Ukraine and standing for democracy, Ukraine's sovereignty, and diplomacy for as long as it takes. This fight matters not just for Ukraine's security and survival, but it also matters for the United States, for Canada, and for other democratic allies around the world. Under President Biden's leadership, the United States has helped to assemble an unprecedented coalition of 50 of the world's democracies to stand against Russia's illegal and brutal aggression. Together, we are working to provide Ukraine the support it needs to defend its people, preserve its sovereignty, and maintain its independence from Russian aggression. And Canada is a key partner in this effort. U.S.-Canada cooperation supports military and humanitarian assistance, as well as economic recovery in Ukraine. Canada and the United States work together to coordinate this forceful, united, and speedy response at the highest levels of our governments. Since Russia's illegal and full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February of 2022, the United States has delivered an unprecedented amount of military assistance to Ukraine, more than $64 billion worth of arms and equipment as part of over $100 billion in total assistance. We have also supported Canada's commitment to Ukraine's defense. Just a few weeks ago, Ukraine received a $400 million plus highly advanced and sophisticated NASAMS air defense system at the right time and place to help Ukraine respond to Russian escalatory attacks as part of our joint commitment to defend the Ukrainian people and their sovereign country from Russian aggression. On this particular issue, we work closely with Canadian Minister of National Defense Bill Blair to ensure that the NASAMS air defense system, purchased by Canada under the Foreign Military Sales Program of the United States Defense Department, to ensure that it could reach the Ukrainians years earlier than if Canada had tried to acquire the system acting on its own through normal procurement channels. In other examples of our cooperation that are a bit closer to Toronto, the United States company General Dynamics manufactures light armored vehicles in London, Ontario, as part of Canada's military assistance to Ukraine, while the Canadian company International Test Pilot School, or ITPS, prepares Ukrainian pilots for onward F-16 fighter training. In Europe, Canadian forces have played an invaluable role on the ground, training Ukrainian armed forces in partnership with allies, deploying aircraft to transit military aid from allied nations, and assisting Ukrainian refugees in Polish-based reception centers. The United States stands ready to work with Canada and leverage our FMS process to continue efficient and timely delivery of Ukraine's highest priority and most advanced defense requirements. Our commitment to Ukraine, however, also extends well beyond defense. Since February 2022, the United States has provided nearly $3.8 billion in humanitarian assistance to refugees, displaced person, and vulnerable communities in Ukraine and the surrounding region. both Canada and the United States have been proud to welcome hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians seeking refuge since March 2022. These Ukrainians have brought their expertise, their stories, and their culture to communities across our countries, enriching both Canada and the United States. I'm proud to have met with many displaced Ukrainians in Canada, and I'm always heartened by their resilience and their desire to share their culture in their new communities as a means of making sure that Ukrainian culture will be preserved on a global basis. In Calgary, for example, I met with Ukrainians and toured the Ukrainian Museum of Canada, which was opened more than 100 years ago when immigrants were looking for arable land and found it in Saskatchewan. Now the museum serves as a hub to reconnect Ukrainians to their heritage as they see it under threat from Russia and to provide support to newly arrived refugees. In Ottawa, I've had many engagements with Cafe Ukraine, some with Ambassador Kovalov. We've spent some wonderful evenings at Cafe Ukraine. That institution is a volunteer-run hub for the thousands of displaced Ukrainians living in Ottawa. People can meet to swap stories, learn English, and get various other forms of relocation assistance as they try to make a home far away from the home they were displaced from. The United States and Canada are also working with allies to support Ukraine's economic recovery, and I know many of you in this room are already leading and supporting these efforts. You will hear more from Deputy Secretary of State for Management and Resources, Richard Verma, later today about American efforts to champion Ukraine's economic recovery. But let me share a few highlights with you now. On energy, the United States is pushing out millions of dollars in emergency funding to repair and restore energy infrastructure in Ukraine and deploy new power generation capabilities. Recognizing Ukraine's important role as the breadbasket of Europe, we committed more than $284 million to demining, which will make arable land safe for farming again in Ukraine. American businesses have stepped up too, partnering with Ukrainian government officials and businesses on energy and other priorities. We know that in the end, the private sector will drive economic recovery in Ukraine. A thriving private sector will spur innovation and attract new investment. And together with Germany, the United States leads the Ukraine Donor Platform's Business Advisory Council, which ensures that business perspectives help shape the economic recovery in Ukraine. The United States continues to work with our allies, including Canada, to unlock more resources to support Ukraine's economic, energy, and military needs. This past July, leaders at the NATO summit in Washington, D.C. announced more financial support and a new initiative, the NATO Security Assistance and Training for Ukraine program, which will coordinate equipment, training, and force development work to support Ukraine's economic recovery. While there are many challenges ahead, NATO allies' strong commitment and the Ukrainian people's resilience, ingenuity, and entrepreneurial skills will all pave the path for economic recovery in Ukraine. The G7 countries are also working to build on commitments made in last year's joint declaration of support of Ukraine. For example, it's recently been in the news that G7 countries are using seized Russian assets to form the basis of a $50 billion loan guarantee program for Ukraine, essentially forcing Russia to pay for the damage it is inflicting on Ukraine. Canada has been a leader and driving force in this initiative. So I have 47 more days as the United States ambassador to Canada, not that I'm counting. But as National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said on Meet the Press last Sunday, and I quote here, "We are going to do everything in our power for our remaining days to get Ukraine all the tools we possibly can to strengthen their position on the battlefield so that they'll be stronger at the negotiating table." That effort includes President Biden's direction to surge the military equipment that we are delivering to Ukraine so that we have spent every dollar that Canada has appropriated by the time that President Biden leaves office. That date is January 20th, but Ukraine's war against Russia will not just go away on that day. While I can't speak to the new administration's policy and approach, I can confirm that there is significant bipartisan support for Ukraine in the United States Congress. Ambassador Kovalev and I saw that at the Halifax International Security Forum, where every single member of a bipartisan Senate delegation pledged ongoing bipartisan support in the United States Congress for Ukraine. I can speak to the Biden administration's commitment to do everything in its power to put Ukraine in the best possible position for as long as Joe Biden remains president. As President Biden has said, and I quote here, "A dictator built on rebuilding an empire will never erase a people's love for liberty. Brutality will never grind down their will to be free. Ukraine will never be a victory for Russia, for free people refuse to live in a world of hopelessness and darkness. Ukraine is literally where the future of freedom will be decided, and the United States is proud to work with Canada and other allies and everyone in this room to support a secure and thriving Ukraine and ensure the Ukrainian people's freedom and a rebuilt Ukraine." So thank you again for having me today, and good luck in the rest of the conference.